alerts off and it is Monday. But besides being Monday, people, good morning, everyone. It is May 1st. Nothing more, exciting about starting a new day, which technically we know the week starts on a Sunday, but Monday with a new month. And also having a guest. How cool is that? Good morning, everyone. It's Carol Sue, aka Naughty Boss Live with
TwoSistas. Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Janice, aka Wellness Diva 5.0 on this Mindset Monday. Yes, it's May 1st. And guess what? It's my birthday month, but today it's not about me. But I did have to mention that, of course. We'll celebrate my birthday all month. Perfect for a Mindset Monday. Today's guest, oh my gosh, she's the author of Raven, Transcending Fear, the founder of Soul Solutions, and wisdom. She really learned hard from her wisdom, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But we want to take this opportunity to welcome our guest to the TwoSistas podcast family, Terri Kozlowski. Welcome, Terri.
Thank you very much, Janice. I'm very happy to be here with you and the two sisters, you and Carol Sue.
Thank you so much. And we're excited. And we were actually joking. We love to joke first thing in the morning. And apparently Terri and I got the memo wearing bright, vibrant rose colors.
Mm-hmm.
Someone did not.
No, I didn't. I guess I am, as I said before, the thorn between roses. And you know what? I'm okay with that. When we go through life experiences, and obviously we're going to be chatting a lot about that today. We hope at any point that when we go through these things, whatever it may be, that we learn and that we can, as Terri's book, Raven, Transcending Fear, we can hopefully transcend that fear. Terri, can you give us a little behind the scenes story of how you transcended your fear and how your book came to be?
If you would have asked me, and I had been asked in my early 20s to write my story, it was not just a no, it was a hell no. And part of the reason for that was because in my 20s, I hadn't gone through any real part of my healing journey. And anytime you have childhood trauma, it is something that you carry with you. And it's not something only that stays with you when you're a child and then a young adult, but it carries throughout your life, because there are things about yourself that did not develop. My childhood trauma occurred when I was 11. And when you have childhood trauma, whatever age you were when it occurred, that's when you stop growing. Your mind doesn't catch up with your body. Your thinking doesn't catch up because you were traumatized. And at 11, you don't know how to deal with those things that happened to you. So my mother was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and we visited her, was supposed to be for a summer. We were only there a couple of weeks. And in that couple of weeks, she decided that she was going to party again. I think having two young girls was not something my mother was ever able to cope with. And because of her own childhood trauma and her own issues that she had, that she used the alcohol and drugs to stuff down her feelings. And part of the reason was because she's Native American, and her identity was ripped away from her when she was 16 years old. And what I mean by that was she was born and raised in Fort Yukon, Alaska, which is inside the Arctic Circle, sustenance living up until all of a sudden, literally no running indoor plumbing, nothing like that, no electricity. And then all of a sudden she gets put on an airplane at the age of 16 with her two sisters and gets adopted by a lovely Christian missionary family who wanted to do right by these three girls. But in doing so, what these white people thought was good for them was to take away everything that they knew, take away their language, take away who they authentically were by saying, now you're going to be these little Christian girls, and we're going to dress you up, and we're going to take you to church, and you're going to believe what we believe. And just because it was what they thought was good for those girls doesn't mean it really was good for those girls. And so my mother's identity was ripped away. And she struggled all the remaining part of her life figuring out who she authentically was and then not know how to reconcile that with the world she was now living in. So when she had my sister and I, it just compounded that.
Now, the mindset part, because, that's a lot for anyone to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless, I think, of what your religious practices are, or anything like that, where you're, and Carol, so I believe we chatted about this one time, where you can be, I forgot how you put it, like you're born into whatever you are, and you may be
right. You basically, it's nurture versus nature. And we correlated that with someone that is adopted. In this case, obviously, adopted, but also removing them, or removing the mom, when she was 16. So her identity in what she already was accustomed to was basically ripped away. And when we talk about that, and that's a little different situation because she was 16 at the time. Mm-hmm. Nature versus nurture would be a great example of someone that was adopted at birth. And the question I always have, because we actually do have that impacted our family life, a relative that was adopted at birth, grew up with an entirely different family, found our family much later on in life when she was almost 30. And she said, what would your question to me be? And I said, nature versus nurture. You're nurtured, hopefully, by a good family. And it's sad what your mom went through, because it sounds like they might have been, their intentions might have been good. Mm-hmm. But, at 16 years of age, you are dealing with somebody that has an established identity with mm-hmm. the way they grew up. In this case, where I went from a nurture versus nature, meaning her genes, her DNA, because ironically, she had so many characteristics of the family, physicality, obviously, but even her mannerisms. So it was an interesting conversation, because even though she was removed and brought up in a whole different family, she still had many family traits. So it's kind of, and that's, your DNA makeup, which is obviously a little bit different from what you're talking about. So I could only imagine, at 16 years old, where it's already complicated by hormones, that tender age of 16, and going from the lifestyle that she was living to now, she must have been in all electricity, like all those things. Mm-hmm. And now you're adding religion and different way of dressing. And at 16, that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And we were talking about mindset. What it comes down to is, it doesn't matter what age you are, your mindset and how you're viewing your current circumstances matters. Whether it is a correct perception or an incorrect perception of what's going on, whatever that perception is for you is exactly then how you respond to your life. And for my mother, she never actually learned how to respond. She reacted. And I have a clear understanding that there is a difference between reacting to situations, because that reaction tends to come from a fearful place. And my mother lived in fear all of her life, versus responding, which comes from a mindful place, which comes from a soulful place. It's about reconnecting your mind to your soul, and then understanding what really is going on, and then responding accordingly. And when you respond, you are thinking and feeling how you're going to do better and move forward, versus that reaction, which is fear-based, which is, I'm trying to protect myself. And right. The ego is a fabulous thing. It is meant to keep us from harm, but the main issue with the ego is it keeps you from harm from things that scared you as a child. It keeps you from harm things that scared you when you were a teenager. And it never allows you to fully comprehend that as you age, as you move through life, circumstances change and you change, and you can handle what happened to you as a child or as a teenager differently now as an adult. than you could as a child. So a lot of the healing process is really about teaching my ego that although I was sexually molested by 3 Hispanic men, which my mother allowed so she could have drugs for free, it meant that for me, Hispanic men terrified me, which is understandable. At the age of 11, I didn't even know what sex was. So when I get back, I don't have language to say this is what happened to me. And when I did find out what sex was, then there was a whole bunch of shame that got put upon me because I was told this had to be a secret. I couldn't tell anybody. And that's one of the things about any type of sexual abuse that occurs, is that a lot of times the victim is told, shh, it's a secret. Don't tell anybody. And as long as you hold on to that secret, that's exactly what happens. That shame is put upon you. And the minute you release that secret, the minute you tell somebody, some of that shame starts to dissipate. And then you realize that there is power in telling your story. And although I didn't write my book until I was 50, I did tell my story to people from the time I was 18 moving forward, because I understood that for me, connecting with other people who had been victimized is something that I was supposed to do to help them overcome. Because so I was sexually assaulted at the age of 11. Oprah Winfrey came out on her show saying that she was sexually assaulted when she was a child. And that was the first person on the planet that I knew of that had been sexually assaulted too. And that for me was a very empowering moment, because I wasn't the only one. And we all suffer in shame, and we all suffer alone until we share our story. And the moment we share our story, we find others just like us. And the sad statistic is that 1 in 3, by the time they're 18, children, not just females, children are sexually assaulted. So then, if you get in a room of 10 people, there's 3 of you that have been sexually assaulted before you were 18. So it's about empowering ourselves to remind ourselves that we are connected, that we are in a community of people who can help one another rise above and overcome.
Wow. When we talk about something so traumatic as something that, whenever children, of course, are in the mix, it chokes me up. How do you move forward? Like, how does that child move forward in life? And as you mentioned, you started telling your story when you were 18. Can you bring yourself back to that moment for just a moment? Like, what was it that happened that you wanted to tell your story? Did you feel, for instance, that was the right moment?
Well, for me, part of the issue was I came back with triggers. When you traumatize it anyway, there are triggers that bring the fear back into the current present moment. And somebody coming up and tapping me on the shoulder was one of my triggers. And I'd come around swinging. And so I was aware that I could harm somebody. Now, I am 5'2", and when I was a teenager, I was even smaller. So me coming around wasn't at all threatening. But for me, I didn't want to hurt anybody. I didn't want to off-put a friend because they did something that was completely innocent because of my triggers. So for me, it was enough for me to say, I had some bad stuff happen to me. And so there are certain things you shouldn't do, so that I don't get scared. And that's how I started telling my story. When I told my dad what happened about 6 months to a year after I came back from visiting my mother, and I went into therapy. I literally got off the airplane on a Saturday and Monday morning, I was in therapy because I was an extremely aware child. And that's one of the things that I think for me was very beneficial, was that I was so aware. I knew I was codependent when I was little. I knew that what happened to me wasn't my fault. I knew I didn't do anything wrong, but I also was aware enough that since I didn't have the language to explain what happened to me, that I couldn't deal with this by myself. So I was in therapy from the time I was 11 until I was 18. Now, they didn't know what to do with me because in 1980, when I started therapy, this wasn't something that was talked about. Child sexual abuse wasn't talked about. So they didn't know quite what to do with me. And of course, since I didn't have the language, I didn't share. And then when I did have the language, I was ashamed. So I didn't want to share. But since I did tell my dad, I knew the therapist knew. And the one thing my dad did really well was he made sure they never drugged me. So, I went through depression, as would be normal, but it wasn't. And yes, I had suicidal thoughts, but I never actually acted upon them. I was one of those that got very introspective. Well, if I wasn't here, how would that affect this, and how, that kind of stuff. But I also knew that the one thing that got me through it all was the last thing my dad said to me before I went on this trip. He took my little chin and looked up into my eyes and said, "Take care of your baby sister." My baby sister is 11 months younger to the day than I am. So 11 months is not all that much in time span. But when all this bad stuff started happening, that's what prompted me to stay fully present and to take care of my baby sister, is how I got us out of there. Because the other thing that happened after the sexual abuse occurred, my mother disappeared for 3 days, literally. We were in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She didn't come home, nothing. So I'm taking care of my baby sister. And then when she does come back, she literally puts us out on the street with our suitcases, shuts the door and locks it, and, told us to go home. Now, home from Albuquerque was Pittsburgh. Long way to get home. So I wanted to go to the police. My sister didn't, because again, as codependent children, we don't want mommy to get in trouble. And going to the police would mean mommy would gotten in trouble. So we didn't go to the police. We went to a friend's house, or my mother's best friend's house, and called my dad. And the next day we were on an airplane back to Pittsburgh.
Wow. So now fast forward, as you go through life, as you start a job, as you are to where you are today, having started your business, what is one thing about mindset that is your key foundation? Because many people have different practices or different things that they put into place each day. What is your go-to thing?
My I am statements. I am is some of the most powerful words you can ever say. I'm tired. Well, guess what? If you keep telling everybody you're tired, you're going to act and be tired. I, on the other hand, am using positive statements. I am an empowered and creative being of light. I am a master of time in the universal flow. So all those things that build me up. I'm a positively mindseted person. I am seeing the positive in my life. I am grateful. And I always end my I am statements, I am that I am. So I actually do 2 things. I have a list of I am statements that I say out loud every morning. And then I have a little notebook where I write, I think there's only 17 lines in this little notebook. So I write 17 I am statements. So I'm reinforcing who I authentically am. And one of the things that happens through most recovery journeys is that, a lot of people think that those that have suffered trauma are broken. And that's not the case. The case is we're always whole. The problem is we put on masks and armor. And when you do that, only part of your light shines through. And then you feel fragmented. And that fragmentation is what makes you feel like you're broken. And as you peel off the layers and the masks and armor that the ego put on to protect you, you end up finding out that you're much stronger without the mask and armor, because who you authentically are has already survived the worst thing that happened to you. And that's the reminder that I remind myself every day. This day is going to be fabulous because I've already been through my darkest days. I've already overcome my darkest days. I've already transcended the fear of being that 11-year-old little girl whose mother couldn't love her, whose mother allowed people to hurt her, whose mother abandoned her on the streets. And if I can survive that and thrive, life is good.
Wow.
We 100% agree. We always talk about the I ams and the journaling and really speaking to the universe, because it reemphasizes and puts that electric current out to the universe to say that I am whole, I am healed. And sometimes that healing is an ongoing journey. And that's why I love the I ams, because we are all are perfectly imperfect. So even though we may have overcome a traumatic experience in our life, and in this case, a childhood, traumatic period. My question, goes into, and I've talked to other people that have gone through, whether it's a traumatic experience in that way, or a physicality, or mental piece, whatever it may be, or injury. If you had that moment in time that your future self could look back to your younger self, and it's a tough question, would you change anything?
Absolutely not. And this
That's
is
the
why.
answer I was looking for.
Yeah, this is why. For me, I truly believe that this isn't my first time on our school. And I believe that I made an agreement with my mother to go through this experience because I want to be wiser. And my soulful self, you talked about us being energy. We're energy. That means I cannot be created or destroyed. So therefore, I chose to come back to Earth School. I chose to have this experience because I am rising above and raising my soulful self to a place where I'm going to serve others. And that's what I'm here to do. When I went through my healing journey, the entire process is a growth process. It's looking back and saying, dang it, I should have seen that sooner, because we all do that. When you have an aha moment, it's like, why didn't I see that sooner? Because you weren't ready. Your aha moments come when you're soulfully and prepared to move on to the next level. And the next level is always bigger. It's always a little bit more challenging, but always much more beneficial, not just for you, but then for the community that you are meant to serve, because we're all here to serve. We're all here to help one another. And for me to be able to serve others who've had other traumatic experiences means I have to be able to I can say this. In my coaching business, I almost always deal with people who've had major trauma, PTSD, or much sexual abuse. And it comes down to the fact that I can relate to them in a way that most therapists cannot. Most therapists come in with clinicals. Well, I know what those clinicals are, and I understand what those clinicals are. But really and truly, for me to be able to say to somebody, I know exactly what you're going through. Been there, done that. Let's talk about how you were feeling at the time so that as we move forward, you can let go of those negativities and those thought processes. Let's alter the tapes that you are playing in your head. And that was, for me, the last major hurdle that I had to go through was that voice in your head. The voice in my head is my mother telling me things like, you're never going to survive. Telling me things like, what do you mean you think you're smart? Those types of things. And then she's been dead for a long time. And yet, for some reason, her voice still tells me those things. And I realized, dang it, I'm the one pressing play on that tape recorder. It's time for me to re-record something that's more positive and more uplifting for me. So when I happen to accidentally press that, it's playing something different.
Now, do you also incorporate, because I truly believe when we add value to an experience of somebody else, and especially if we are that relatable because we've been through the same thing, forgiveness has to be a huge part of the healing process. Not only, and a lot of people will say to me, they say, oh, Carol, so you're probably one of the most forgiving people I know. And I said, well, my response to that would be, probably not the norm for a lot of people. For me, forgiveness is not necessarily for the person that did harm. It's for me. Because if I can't forgive them, I can't move forward. I can't see the value in that kind of ugly moment or the ugly situation. Do you also incorporate the forgiveness piece? Because it's a hard part of the healing process.
Absolutely. And this is why. If I don't forgive, then I am staying attached to that negativity. I'm not releasing that negativity. And my definition of depression is fearful of and focused on the past, because that's what depression is. You're always looking backwards. Anxiety is fear and always looking to the future. Therefore, the only place that you can truly find peace is in the present moment. And so I work really hard on living only in the present moment. Yes, you have to plan, but that doesn't mean that you're living in your future. That means you are planning for your future. You're setting goals and you're creating an action plan to move that direction. But living in the present moment means that for me to let go of the pain, to let go of the hurt, to let go of the shame, to let go of any guilt means I have to forgive not only the perpetrators, not only my mother, but myself. Because a lot of times when we are on the healing journey and we say, I said, dang it, why do I keep pressing the play button? You have to forgive yourself for understanding that this is a process. You don't just heal. I mean, you don't have that, because that is not your purpose here. Your purpose here is to learn and to grow. And for you to learn and to grow means it's a process. And that process includes letting go of attachments. And if you don't forgive, you stay attached. And you can't stay attached to something in the past if you want to move forward. You just can't.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. We often talk about that particular piece on our podcast always, because it's a necessary part of the healing. And, those that say, I'm okay, I'm all right. Well, I have a lot of conversations with different people, and they will bring up those particular instances of the past. I mean, I think we all do to a certain piece of it. And then it's, okay, got to self-check myself. What didn't I forgive? What didn't I let go? Because it is a process. We're forever growing. Growth, you hope growth never ceases to be watered or fertilized, because that means that, we've completed it all. And I don't think we ever complete it all. We're not supposed to. It's supposed to be always to the next thing. Great insight on that. I absolutely love that. Another question I would have, how is your sister doing? And, that moment where, your mom passed, because, we talk about this in our own family, you realize, once that parent is gone, you are that next generation. You are that entering into that phase. And did you leave something that went in the boneyard before you got to say it?
So my sister is on her own journey, and we are very different in lots of different ways. And her journey is her journey. She's living her life the best she can live, and she's content currently. She's done a lot of growth in the past several years. So kudos for her for doing that. When my mother passed, it was very interesting because my mother and I really didn't communicate as adults. Well, once I became an adult, we really didn't communicate. I saw my mother did come to my wedding, and I did take my son to visit her once when he was 18 months old, because I wanted to be able to say, I invited my mother to my wedding if we ever reconciled, and that she got to meet my son. We never did reconcile because my mother was never able to put herself aside and actually be the mother that I wanted or needed. So I had to learn to understand that what I needed and wanted from my mother isn't what I got. That's part of forgiving myself for the expectations I had of somebody that couldn't give me that.
Right.
When she passed, because I hadn't spoken to her in over 6 years when she passed. And on her deathbed, she again abandoned my sister and I, because she told the people in hospice she did not have any family and did not have any children, which I don't know why the hospice people decided to tell my sister these things, but it took them 2 months for them to find my sister and for us to know that she had passed.
I see.
And a couple months after she passed, I realized something. I didn't mourn her death. I mourned the fact that we didn't reconcile, because I'm a very positive person and always believed that we would reconcile. And then it occurred to me, well, wait a second, she's passed and we can reconcile, because energy is neither created or destroyed. And now she's pure energy and pure love and pure light. Now we can reconcile. And so I made my peace. And that part was only for me. That was for me to be able to I don't believe that closure exists. I think closure is a myth of the ego to keep us stuck, waiting for something that will never occur. Because even if my mother ever would have come to me and told me why, it wouldn't have been acceptable.
Right.
And a lot of times we go through life with the question, why me? And the reality is, it doesn't matter whatever the answer anybody ever gives you. Why you? Why did this happen to you? It's never going to be one that you find acceptable. It just isn't. So why did my mother allow this to happen? So she could have drugs is the best answer I could come up with. And that's not an answer that I can accept, that is allowable for you to harm a child. So the correct question to ask, and believe it or not, my dad asked me this when I told him what happened. He asked me this, and I didn't catch it for 35 years. Now what? Now what is the question you should ask instead of why me? Now what means that you are focused on the present moment. You're not looking backwards. Why me is looking backwards and staying stuck in the past, stuck in the trauma, stuck in the pain, and not moving forward. Now what means I'm refocusing on myself. I'm refocusing on the present moment. And now I'm going to retake my power and move forward. So so that's why I think closure is a myth, because closure is still always asking, why me?
That is so true. And I'm getting the chills thinking of this particular situation, which I won't obviously get into a lot of the details, but I think forgiveness, the act of forgiveness, is almost like a fog. It's I really believe it's part of the self-care process. Like, forgiveness has many, I believe, different steps, and that's a fog, because it's really an unknown. But when you are able within your mind to forgive a person, that was, for me, it was a very long drawn out process. And I finally got there, but I would have to say the tip of the iceberg was when I was finally able to ask this person a very specific question, like, why? It doesn't make any sense to me, but why did you do this? Can you enlighten me? And I got my answer. And just as you were saying that it's really unacceptable, but I felt at peace because I got my answer. Now, I always believe in hope. I did believe in hope. However, I know within my own heart, within my own soul, that I've moved way past forgiveness. I have forgiven myself for whatever part I am responsible for. But I think for those who are struggling, it's more of a, like, everybody goes through a different process, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but it's all a part of the process. And to get out of that fog and see the light is kind of a really nice thing.
It is. And one of the things that why people get stuck is because a lot of us want justice. I was wronged and I want justice.
Yep.
But the reality is, for me to get justice, and my dad did ask me when I told him what happened, he did ask me if I wanted to prosecute. And I knew enough, I was 12 at the time, I knew enough about sexual assault to know how difficult it was in 1981 to prosecute that. So I understood that doing that wasn't going to actually help me in any way, shape, or form. So I said, no, I don't want to do anything. Part of it is I don't know the names of the 3 men that sexually assaulted me. I could give them my mother and her best friend's name, but that was it. I couldn't these guys had nicknames. That's all I knew. So I had no idea. So prosecuting wasn't something, but justice, you have to decide what justice you are looking for. If you want revenge, that's different than justice. If you want justice in the fact that you want them to be punished, you have to look at, do you have the evidence to punish them? For me, my justice was overcoming. standing up on my own 2 feet, making a life for myself that was better than what any of them ever had, by my own choices and by my own awareness, and being able to forgive and move forward. All of that they could never do. All of them were in a place where they were suffering, which is why I was sexually assaulted. So looking back and understanding that, and again, hindsight is 2020, being in the midst of all that, I couldn't see any of this. And this is where your healing journey comes in, and where you get perspective and your mindset changes over a course of time, where you realize that the best revenge is to being able to do better than they ever could.
Well,
Yeah. And I'm not a fan. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a fan of the word revenge, because to me, it's a key piece of you still holding on to something, whether it's anger, hurt, justification, accountability. And I like to go in with a positive thought that all of the bad stuff, the junk, the garbage, the devastation, the torment, was a necessary piece for the happiness, for the impactfulness, for adding value. Because like you said, a lot of people that seek, that healing journey, that start that healing journey, we know it's going to be a long process, but how the betterment of being along that journey with someone that actually is relatable is so powerful in it of itself, that's the beauty of the nasty.
Correct.
So to me, I'm not a fan of the word revenge, because to me, it's like we're all holding on to something, and we're
Right.
going to prove them wrong. No, it's not a question of proving anyone wrong. It's just proving your capability, your gifts, that
Your resilience.
Your resilience and your purpose. I think that's what speaks out in your words, which I absolutely love.
Absolutely. And the only reason I use that word is because a lot of people who are still suffering are still looking for that. And
Right.
the reality is they're not going to find it in a way that satisfies them. The only way to satisfy any of that is to actually heal and actually realize that the healing journey is what you're supposed to be on. One of the big things that, and I talk about it in my book, I talk about the thorny blanket. And what I mean by that is there is pain that we get accustomed to. And that pain is something we're familiar with because we've carried it for so long. But at some point, that thorny blanket becomes way too heavy to carry. And when we start peeling off that thorny blanket, we don't realize that there's still wounds that are oozing, but it's been covered up by the, thorns been in it. So when we start the healing journey, we have to relive some of that pain because we're still festering, we're still oozing, we're still healing. And that healing process, and even on real skin, there's the cut, there's the bleed, there's the infection, then there's the scab, all these things that happen. And that's what the healing journey really is understanding that when you remove that thorny blanket is because you are ready and willing to say, I can't bear the weight of this familiar pain anymore in my life. And to remove the thorny blanket is the start of the real healing process, because that thorny blanket is what you put on after the trauma. It is something that you wrapped yourself up in to protect yourself, and the ego knows, okay, this is good. We're safe here, even though you're festering and bleeding underneath all of that. And as you remove that and start that healing process, it's time and realization that I'm ready. This pain that I've been carrying around is not mine to carry anymore.
Well said. Wow. I think we really only have scratched the surface, so to speak. Speaking of thorny blankets, and it just goes to show you, and Carol, so we've chatted about this before, about behavior is a normalcy, even though it may not be good for us. And technically we know it's not good for us. We do it because it's normal. And again, I think it goes back to the ego. Wow. Before we sign off, Terri, where can our viewers and listeners connect with you further?
They can connect with me on my website, terrikozlowski.com, or my podcast, the soulsolutionspodcast.com, which is everywhere. And that's how Janice and I met, was through a class that we took together for podcasting long ago. And I'm all across social media, and I have a YouTube channel as well, Soul Solutions.
Wonderful.
Awesome. And what about your book?
My book, Transcending Fear, is available on Amazon, or you can go to raventranscendingfear.com as well.
Awesome.
Wonderful. And of course, we will make sure that gets in the show notes for sure. Wow. Again, an amazing conversation. We hope perhaps that you will definitely consider coming back.
Sure.
And, oh my gosh, Carol, so do you have any closing comments before we sign off?
Well, I think, your purpose was long predicted in the air, in the gods, in the universe, way before you knew. Your insightfulness at such a young age is one that is very unusual. And I think there was a reason. My belief is that, there's a reason why God blessed you with the gift of articulation, especially at a very young age, because sadly, and most inevitably, a travesty to the victim. When you're a victim of something to that appalling that, a lot of us can't even imagine. Many children, as you say, it's kind of fight or flight. You like, what do? I say silent. I don't have the speech. I don't have the articulation to know what's really going on. Somehow, you were gifted the ability to even share with your dad. It's very unusual. And especially some of the cases that I've read, that would even be part of the equation. And I think that was part of the journey, part of the gifts that you were gifted, while you didn't probably know at the time. Your willingness to be open enough with your dad to let him know, to whatever degree at that point. Many children could not have done that. And I do believe that there's a higher God with why you received that gift. So that in itself is what struck me, your articulation and your ability to share such a traumatic experience with your dad, because that's difficult. So I think there was a bigger purpose in that. And what you're doing is amazing. I think anyone is blessed to start their journey with you.
Thank you.
Because of your relatability, your rawness, but the way you articulate, it's soft, but it's firm, which is very rare.
The firmness, I completely get. The softness, my husband would take issue with.
Won't they all? No,
Yeah.
but you really do. You really do add value, and we're so grateful and blessed and honored that you could take your morning out with us and really, touch upon our listeners and viewers out there. You don't have to suffer.
No.
Some people say there's a reason, that's part of the journey, and that could be, but there is help out there. That you have to know that there's other people that are relatable to your situation. And we hope that anyone, if this strikes a chord with you, major, the hairs on your arm go up, or you got those goosebumps, or someone that's in a situation like this. The first step is just reaching out. And I think you've provided
Absolutely.
that value today, which is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. And on that note, I just want to thank, of course, all of our amazing listeners currently on the Wisdom audio app. I see a lot of familiar names, so thank you so much for being here. It is Mindset Monday, May 1st, my birthday month, and I am the beautiful thorn between two lovely roses. My name is Janice, aka Wellness Diva 5.0, and I am with two
Sisters, and this is Carol Sue, aka Naughty Boss. It is Mindset Monday. Where are you going to let that universe bring you to? Put it out there. Do your IMs, do your journaling, put it out to the universe. Remember, we always talk about our mindset. Our thoughts are electric currents. Are you going to spark the world? Or are you going to let them fizzle? We hope not. Take care, everyone, and we will see you tomorrow for Triumph Tuesday. I know some of us are going to be triumphing over a bunch of different things going on today, but make sure that you're doing it with value, adding purpose, positivity, and always kindness. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.